Let's go ahead and take a look at the foreach method. According to the Mozilla Developer Network, MDN, foreach calls a provided callback function once for each element in an array in ascending order. Now let's go ahead and break down the syntax to see how the foreach method works. First, we have an array on which our specified function is called, perhaps an array of numbers, strings, objects, whatever you want to iterate through. Next, we have the foreach method that we call. Inside of the foreach method, we have a callback function. This is going to be called on every element in the array. Next, we have the value of the current element that we are iterating through. Following that, we have an optional index that we can pass in, along with another option for our array object on which the function is called. Lastly, we have the this value. Undefined is passed if this value is not provided. Now let's go ahead and take a look at an example. Let's imagine that we have an array of scary creatures: lions, tigers, and bears. Our goal is to iterate through our array and print a message to the console. Dorothy is afraid of lions. Dorothy is afraid of tigers. Dorothy is afraid of bears. Now you may have previously learned how to do this with the for loop. We set the value of our counter I, which executes before the loop starts. We create a condition, which is the condition for running the block of code within your loop. Then an incrementer, which runs after each iteration of your loop. Then in our code block, we have access to our scary creatures array at the index of I using bracket notation. In our first loop, I is set to 0, which scary creatures at index of 0 is lions. So we print out the message, Dorothy is afraid of lions. In our second loop, I is set to 1, and scary creatures at index of 1 is tigers. So we print out the message, Dorothy is afraid of tigers. In our third loop, I is set to 2. Scary creatures at index of 2 is bears. So we print out the message, Dorothy is afraid of bears. Then I is incremented to 3. And we don't meet our condition because 3 is not less than scary creatures.length, which is also 3. So we end our loop. So now that we've refreshed our mind in how we do this with a for loop, let's see how we might accomplish this with the foreach method. We begin with our array, scary creatures, filled with lions, tigers, and bears. We then attach our foreach method to our array. Following that, we pass in our callback function to run on every element in our array. Then what makes the foreach method such a pleasure to work with is that we can easily access our current value. We don't have to use bracket notation. We also don't have to initialize a counter, set a test condition, or an incrementer, removing the possibility of creating syntax errors. As we iterate through our array, our current item is lions. We access our current item with the name scary creature and print this message out to the console. Once we run the code in our code block, we look at the next item in our array, tigers. Once again, we have access to this with scary creature and print out our message to the console. And finally, we do this one more time as bears becomes our current value and we run the code in our code block and print to the console. Now that we've done that, let's take a look at one of our optional values. Let's look at a possible implementation using the optional index value. We'll imagine that we have the following array: guest invites, containing the strings Peter, Paul, and Mary. We want to print to the terminal 1:Peter, 2:Paul, 3:Mary. Let's look how to pull this off using the optional index value. We don't have to do anything extra to set this value. Whatever the current value is in the array will have access to its index. So in our code block, using string interpolation, we look at our current value, Peter as guest. In our index of Peter, which is 0, which we then add 1 to 0 to make sure our output in the console is 1:Peter. And then we repeat this process again. Our current val, guest, is Paul at index of 1. So we add 1 to 1, and the result is 2:Paul. Finally, our current value, guest, is Mary at index of 2. So we add 1 to 2 and get 3:Mary. Thanks for taking a look at this brief introduction to the foreach method.